It was all the craze just about a year ago. A lot of teams out there, hashtag tanking for Tua. Now you look around and you got a lot of people going, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners, hopefully you're all doing well out there. You heard it in the opening. What do we do with Tua? Now the Combine's right around the corner. There's going to be some other names that start popping up on some draft boards, some guys that start to creep back up, but should we just forget about Tua? His name is all over the news. Also, teams possibly moving up to take him. Does he still fall within the top 10? Does he go top 5? There's a lot of different scenarios revolving around Tua. Now, no, I'm not going to say his last name a whole lot because I'm sure at some point I'll mispronounce it, and you'll let me know 50 million times down below in the comment section. Not about that life. But what we're going to be talking about today is whether or not he's worth the risk. But I'm not doing it alone. And I mentioned this here just about a couple weeks ago, maybe a few months back now, that we're going to be adding somebody here to the show that's really going to provide some next level knowledge. Now, I can go look through injury reports and relay messages to you guys, and that's all great. That's what we've done in the past, but sometimes it just exceeds my knowledge. So what do? We find somebody who has that knowledge. We have somebody joining the team here. It's Dr. Ethan Turner. Yes, he is actually a doctor, and we're going to be using his knowledge all throughout the season to really develop our takes on some of these guys. Are they worth the risk? Is it kind of being overhyped to maybe where it's not that big of a deal? That's what we're going to be talking about all year long. So if you're looking for next level knowledge like that, make sure you hit the subscribe button. But for now, today, we're talking about Tua. Is he worth the risk in the NFL draft? How, detrimental is this injury to his career? All those questions going to be answered here today. But like I said, not doing it alone. We're going to head over to our new segment called What's Up, Doc? With Dr. Ethan Turner. All right, and here we go. As delivered, the man, the myth, the legend is before us. I mentioned in the opening, Ethan, and I don't know if you've heard it or not, probably not since I didn't share it with you, but some of this knowledge we're going to be talking about here, as far as injuries go, it exceeds my knowledge. So that's why we have brought you on board. I want to make sure that Headliner Nation welcomes you to the team. Make sure you put it down in the comment section down below. But Ethan, welcome to the team. We are very, very excited to have you and are definitely looking forward to the knowledge that you bring here.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm super excited. I definitely think that understanding the injuries, while it doesn't seem very complicated with my education, it's definitely something that people just you hear so much misinformation. So I'm excited to kind of bring a little bit more experience knowledge to the Headliner Nation. I'm super thrilled to be on.
Yep, absolutely. Glad to have you. And I have your Twitter handle there down below on the screen. It's at eTurnerFF_PT. Make sure you head over to Twitter and follow Ethan. He has a lot of great information that comes out here on a regular basis, and he's going to be here with us all season long, dropping all kinds of knowledge. But today we're talking about Tua. And I'm not going to pronounce the last name a whole lot because I'm not smart enough to do that, and I'm going to mess it up a lot. So I'm just going to call him Tua for the entire show. But I kind of want to get your take on Tua. His name is all over the news here recently. A lot of teams, talking about trading up for Tua. Does he fall inside the top 10, the top 5? There's a lot of different scenarios playing out there. But before we get to that point, I kind of want to just go in depth with your knowledge and figure out what is this actual injury that Tua is dealing with.
Yeah. So Tua is an interesting case. He has a pretty long injury history. I always say that injury history is pretty much the most important thing that I look at because it's the best predictor that we have of future injuries. So if you know where a player is weak at, that's where they're most likely to be injured again. So with Tua, the big one, obviously, this is probably the biggest question going into the NFL Combine. If you listen to anyone that talks about the Combine that's in the know with the NFL, they all say that the most important thing that NFL teams get out of the Combine is actually the medical grades. It has nothing to do with the testing. It has nothing really. The interviews are important, but everyone is really concerned about the medical grades, and they put these guys through the ringer. And Tua, given his talent, is going to be probably the biggest question mark that people have going into the Combine. So I'm excited to kind of dig in with you on what this injury that he's recovering from actually is. So on November 16th, Tua basically gets tackled by two guys at the same time. And while a lot of people are confused with the fact that the the tackle didn't really look that brutal. If you go back and look at it on replay, essentially what happens is his right knee digs directly into the ground and it plants and sticks there. And what that does is it forces his hip backwards. The problem with that is that the hip isn't meant to go that way. This is an injury that is most commonly seen actually in a car accident because your knee hits the dashboard and it pushes your hip back in the hip socket. So the official diagnosis that's come out was a hip dislocation and posterior wall fracture. And so basically his hip popped out of socket backwards. And when it did that, it actually took a chunk of the back of his hip socket with it. And so it sounds very brutal, and it actually is pretty brutal. Um, we don't know for sure what the extent of the damage was. What we do know, and what is good for Tua going forward, is that it was immediately reduced. And so that means that basically as soon as they got him off the field and into the back in the trainer's room, the medical staff for Alabama, which is I'm sure top notch given the prestige of that program, was able to basically pop his hip back into place. And that's important because I think with hip injuries, we don't see them a lot in football, but the ones that we have seen have been very detrimental to players' career. Hip similar injury is actually what took Bo Jackson's career. The difference is that with Tua, and his last name is pronounced Tagovailoa. I'm still going to call him Tua too, because that's a tongue twister. So Tua the tongue twister. I dig
Right.
that. With Tua, his hip was immediately reduced, and that definitely is positive for his outcome looking forward. With Bo Jackson, he actually popped his own hip back in. This is just crazy to me. He popped his own hip back in, and then actually he didn't play again on it, but he was walking around on the sideline. What happened with Bo Jackson and the reason that ended up ending his career is because when he popped it back in and then subsequently walked all over it again, he damaged the blood vessel that wraps and provides blood to the head of uh, the femur. And so when you take the blood out, the bone starts to die. And so that's what happened with Bo Jackson. That is not what happened with Tua. He got that immediately reduced, and then he actually had surgery on November 18th. And the surgery was not to. The surgery is a pretty. It's a pretty intense surgery, but basically what they do is they take screws and plates and they reposition the bone that popped off the back of his hip socket and reattach it so that it can heal and basically become a hip socket again. So they did that on November 18th. The dates are always important when you're talking about injuries because when we're talking about timelines and recovery, we need to know exactly when these things happen. So November 18th is when he actually had the surgery. And so everything since then has been recovery. So he is right at about 2 months. We're just past 4 months. We're just past the 4-month mark with his recovery. So he should be in his rehab progressing very quickly from this point on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's key right now for a lot of teams is because even though he may be, on somebody's draft board, how early do they want to take him? How much, draft capital do they want to invest on somebody that they may not have this year going into next year? I mean, there's still a lot of those question marks, and recovery time is definitely something that a lot of people want to know about because the draft's right around the corner. And,
Yeah.
if you had to take a stab at it, I'm obviously nobody's going to hold you to it, but what is the typical type of recovery time that we may be looking at for Tua? Does he have a chance to play football this year?
I think he does have a chance to play football. Typically, with this injury, with a high level athlete, which obviously a football player would be, they can start doing some more athletic activities at around the 4-month mark. So we should be within the next month or two starting to see a few videos of Tua at least throwing. The the one thing that is always a wrench when it comes to player recovery, especially rookies and especially franchise quarterbacks, is that teams aren't going to invest in Tua and then immediately try to push him to the point where this injury could severely impact his career. There's no incentive for them to draft him with arguably, I'm going to assume that he's going to be a top 5 NFL draft pick. no team that drafts him has any incentive to push him into a starting role quicker than he is fully recovered. Now, that being said, typically about 9 months is a full recovery for something like this injury. And so it is not totally going to be ruled out that he could play at some point this season. The only thing that would be stopping that is if a team that drafts him decides that they don't want to put him on the field. They want to give him basically a red shirt first NFL season. And we won't know that until we hear from them.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm obviously not an NFL GM as of yet. I'm working on it. But if it's me, I'm looking at a franchise here in the draft that has that veteran starter that they can use this year. Let Tua kind of not only learn the playbook and get used to the life of the NFL, but get fully healthy. Not draft him and throw him out there like you just said. Absolutely. Is there any possible future limitations that you can see? He wasn't really one of these guys who's looking to scramble outside of the pocket. The most rushing yards he had in a year was 192 years ago. So he's not one of these guys that's looking to run a lot. He's going to stay in the pocket. But do you think this is something that could limit him going forward in the future?
I think the biggest thing is not the actual this injury occurring again. It is pretty rare to have something like this happen. Really, just unfortunate circumstances. The way that his knee planted and pushed that femur back and dislocated it. Very unlikely that he ever gets tackled like that again. But that said, there are some pretty significant issues that could creep up down the road as a result of this injury first. Biggest thing that we're worried about with recovery and especially long term is arthritis in that hip. So anytime you have a major injury to a joint, you're always worried about arthritis developing in that hip. Now, like you said, he isn't a guy that necessarily relies on his athleticism to win, but it is something that as that arthritis can set in, it can become a source of pain, and that will affect his ability to play. Think of like Todd Gurley's knee. Same situation could happen down the road for Tua. Other complications, obviously, if you were to injure the hip again, that would be pretty significant. Um, but I wouldn't expect a ton of issues. Um, I think he's past the point now in his recovery where if something major was going to crop up, like a blood supply issue, like what Bo Jackson had, we would already have gotten word of that. And that's one thing that I pay attention to a lot is how much good news is coming out after an injury, a major injury like this. And for Tua, most of it has been good.
Yeah, I mean, there hasn't been I haven't heard any negative news, to be honest. I mean, if anything, the biggest news is him moving up draft boards and not down draft boards, which is a little crazy to think about since nobody's really seen or heard from him. I mean, he's a great kid. I'm hoping the best for him. But as of recently, some of the rumors you hear, teams, trading up into the top 2, top 3 to possibly take him. If you're an NFL GM, knowing your background of this injury, do you take a chance on Tua?
I think you have to. I mean, I think that his talent outweighs. We're only a year removed from everyone talking about teams actively losing
Yep.
to get a Tua.
Tanking for Tua.
This is an interesting scenario because nobody was expecting Joe Burrow to do what Joe Burrow did. And so I think had Joe Burrow not exploded and had this amazing season, we would still be talking about Tua possibly going as the number 1 overall pick. I don't even think that we can totally rule that out as a possibility, given the talent that he had. Now, injuries are the biggest question mark. And that's why this NFL combine is going to be huge for him because teams are going to poke and prod and x-ray and MRI and do all of the things that they need to do to clear this hip. We look at, or at least I look at, what teams tell us about these injuries. And so if a team is willing to invest or even trade up to get a Tua, that is a very good sign for how his hip is recovering.
Yep.
And so I would not be totally surprised if we saw a team like the Lions with a veteran quarterback who admittedly is still very, very good, but has only 1 year left on his contract. They could even be looking at a guy like Tua just because of the talent and the advantage and the upside that he has and could give an NFL team.
Yep, absolutely. A couple other teams that I've heard mentioned, the Miami Dolphins stay in the mix. I've heard rumors of the Oakland Raiders trading up to get him. There's a couple other options out there, and it's going to be really interesting, especially as we go through the combine. But let's turn to a fantasy football perspective here, just for a little bit, maybe a little bit of dynasty talk. In dynasty leagues, where do you take Tua? I mean, at what point do you take that big risk right there towards the beginning? I mean, it depends. I know if it's a super flex league or not, but how much faith do you have from a fantasy football perspective, considering there may be that option that he doesn't play this year, depending on where he falls?
I think for me, Tua is definitely a first round pick in super flex leagues. Obviously, if you're starting two quarterbacks and you got a chance to get a guy of his talent level, you have to take that risk, even though the injuries are a major concern. If a team's willing to invest in them and they know more than any of us do, I think from dynasty perspective, I would be willing to invest probably a top 5 dynasty super flex pick. Now, outside of Superflex, he's probably going to fall more just because those skill position players are more important. The quarterback is so deep, and you don't
Mhm.
really want to have a guy just riding your bench all year if they choose to sit him. That being said, I don't think this year he's going to provide a ton of value. Like I said, there's no incentive to rush him into it for whatever team decides to take him. So I would say that in a redraft league, he's probably going to be on my do not draft list. But in dynasty, I think he's worth the pick if you're in a super flex format where you're starting two quarterbacks and if he starts sliding in the first round. I have seen every dynasty league that I am in has been talking about Tua as a top 5 super flex pick, even regardless of the injury. And so I don't see him falling much further than that, especially if he has a solid combine. All the reports out of the combine medicals are positive. I just don't see any way that you're not going to have to pay basically full price for Tua.
Yep, absolutely, 100% agree. He's definitely got the talent. He showed it there in college, and like you said, with all these positive reports that we've heard, no negative reports, it's only trending up here for Tua. But hey, that is a lot of information for Tua. There's a lot of people that are asking these questions, and I greatly appreciate you taking the time to come on here and share some of that information. You also have put a lot of time and effort into something that you've done here this offseason. And I want to give you an opportunity to tell people, if they want to get in contact with you on Twitter, what it is that you've taken hours upon hours to do this offseason.
Yeah, so my biggest project and probably the one of the most important things that I do for the fantasy community outside of obviously talking about injuries all the time is the injury histories that I collect for college prospects. I basically have a database. It's a Google Doc. I call it database because it sounds cooler,
Mm-hmm.
but it has about 200 prospects on it that are coming into the NFL draft every year. I've done this for 3 years now. And what I do is I go back and I research and find basically every single injury that I can find. I said on the top of the show that injury history is the most important thing that we have in order to predict future injury. So if you don't have the data in front of you, there's no way to accurately decide if a guy is an injury risk going into the NFL or not. I do sell access to that. I wish I didn't have to sell it. I wish I could just give it to people for free. But it does take me about 30 minutes for every prospect I do. I'm hoping to have 50 prospects done. I've got all the top probably 10 players at offensive positions, and I've got 5 of the top edge rushers already done already. And so this is just my passion project. I hope that people find it valuable. It's the only place that you can find it. I'm the only guy that has this information. Some of the biggest fantasy analysts that you can listen to pay for this information from me because they know how valuable it is. And so if any of Headliner Nation wants to reach out to me on Twitter, you can find the link to my Twitter below and reach out. Send me a DM. I would love to answer any questions that you have. And if you want an access to this doc, it's definitely worth it. It's $10. I should mention that. I guarantee you won't find anything else like it in fantasy circles, and it is a huge advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something, like I mentioned also at the top of the show, we're going to be doing shows like this with Ethan all year long. I mean, we're going all the way through the season, preseason, draft time, draft guides coming up. There's going to be a lot of injury, talks that that we're going to be having here. So if you have those questions, put them down below in the comment section. We definitely want to make sure we stay interactive. I mean, the comment section down below in all of our videos is usually pretty crazy, so give us a little bit of time. But myself, Ethan, Kyle, a member of Headline Nation, somebody's going to get back to you. So if you have those questions, make sure you put them down below. Ethan, it was a lot of fun for your first show. Congratulations. Welcome to the team here once again.
Thanks so much, man. Yeah. I had a great time. This is gonna be great. I really think this is gonna be some good stuff here.
Yep, we're gonna help a lot of people win some fantasy championships here this year. But hey, greatly appreciate the support of everybody out there. Hopefully you guys have a great rest of your weekend, a great week coming up. Looking forward to the Combine. The Combine's just next week. Myself and Kyle going to be in Indianapolis. We've thrown something out there already. We're going to be doing a meet and greet on Wednesday afternoon downtown Indianapolis. Make sure you follow us on social media to find out where all that information is. So hopefully you guys have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you later.